Hey everyone, Liam Ward here. Today we are talking about blues improvisation / soloing. So we're not talking about copying, learning another person's solo. It's about coming up with your own stuff. And we're going to look at this from kind of all aspects, from absolute basics through to more advanced stuff, hopefully. I've got a list of kind of topics that I want to talk to you about. I've also got some questions that have come in ahead of time. I'm going to take questions as well. If you've got a question you want to ask it in the chat, then do. Let me know in the chat where you're coming from. We've got Kelvin. Hey, Kelvin. Good to see you. Jacques, we have. Says thanks for the lessons. You're welcome, Jacques. Arvind, Glenn, we've got Samuel. Hey, Samuel. So let me know where you're coming from. But I think that there's so much to talk about when it comes to improvisation, and I don't think there's really a right answer. Okay, there's no correct way to improvise. There are concepts, there are ideas we can use, but I'm just going to share some of my thoughts, some of the things that have worked for my students, some of the things that my students find really useful. And I hope that something will resonate with you today. You'll take something away from this that will help you with your soloing, with your improvising. Okay, I'm going to use some of the ideas that I have in my premium course all about blues improvisation, and as a thank you for joining with me today, I'm giving you 40% off the course, any of the modules or all of the course if you want to buy the whole thing, until the end of the Q&A. There is a link in the description. I will put it I'll put it in the chat now as well, just so you've got it. So if you follow the link, then you can get 40% off the course, which goes into a lot of the stuff we're looking at today in more detail. I'm just going to hopefully get you started, give you some of the ideas to do with structure, understanding blues structure, note selection. That's a big one. What notes to play, rhythmic variety, dynamics, textures, all that kind of thing. So we're going to start off with just the idea of structure. So let's say you're a beginner and you're looking to solo and you're just trying to think, well, what shall I do to get started without any knowledge? We've got T in Singapore. Hey there. We've got Henk in Belgium, Stefan in Bulgaria. We have got Clay tuning in from the USA. Well done, Clay. I know it must be quite early there. We've got Hans in Belgium, Arvin's in the USA, and Paul is in France. Cool. We've got quite a range today. So the structure that you're playing over is really important, but the structure of what you're playing as well is important. So it's really useful to understand the 12-bar blues structure, so that when you're listening to a blues or playing over a backing track or playing with a band, knowing the structure you're playing over makes it a lot easier to decide what to play over the top of that blues. And lucky for us, there's a really common blues structure. There's a really common way of playing blues, and that's the 12-bar blues. And if you're not familiar with that, I really recommend that you check out some lessons. I have lessons on blues structure, the 12-bar blues, learning about the 1, 4, and the 5 chords. Now, that's going to be really important to get you started. And a lot of the stuff we're going to look at today is going to assume that you know what the 1 chord is, what the 4 chord is, and what the 5 chord is, and that you're familiar with this idea of 12-bar blues. So do check out some lessons on that, on my lessons, other people's lessons. There's some great lessons on the structure. I don't want to have to teach you that structure today, because probably most of you who are tuning in are familiar with it. But in terms of structure, what I want to talk about, even if you've never soloed before, you can think about splitting up that 12 bars into different licks. So let's say you're just playing to a 12-bar blues and you can count through those 12 bars. A really easy way of playing a solo is to just think about splitting that 12 bars up into smaller chunks and playing one lick in the first 4 bars, another lick in the next 4 bars, and a final lick in the third 4 bars. That kind of just really basic splitting it into chunks. You can even just play the same thing 3 times. It doesn't, we're not even thinking about playing something fancy or kind of worrying about the chords at this point. We're just thinking about the simple idea of repetition. Now, I'm going to try putting a jam track on just to give you an example. I'm hoping that the sound is not going to cut this out. I'll just stick it on and see if we've got sound. Let me know if you can hear that in the chat. If not, we'll work around it. Should be able to hear a kind of shuffly sort of blues. Let me know. We've got Swaggy, who's in Stoke-on-Trent. We've got Carl in Connecticut, USA. Yeah, you can hear it good. Hopefully, you'll still be able to hear it when I play over it. We'll see. Okay, so the simplest way to start soloing without us talking about the fancy stuff we're going to get onto, note selection, scales and dynamics, rhythmics, yada yada, is to think of how to split up that 12 bars. So if we can count through it, 1, 2, this is counting the bars, 3, 4, 1, 2, this is counting the bars, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can count those bars. That means you can split your phrases up to fit in different parts of that 12-bar blues. So, for example, you could say, I'm going to play something that just fits, that goes over the first 4 bars. And then I'm going to repeat that over the next 4 bars. And then I'm going to repeat it again over the final 4 bars. This is like the most basic, no variety, just the same thing. And it kind of works. So I can see you were saying it's harder to hear the backing track when I'm playing. I'm going to try and play quietly. So hopefully you'll hear the backing track. Let's see. Now, that's not a good solo necessarily. It's not a great solo, but it should, in a simple way, illustrate this idea of the same phrase 3 times. There's no variety in there, but this is the most basic form of thinking about repetition and variation. And this concept, repetition and variation, is a crucial one when it comes to improvising, to soloing. Because as a listener, if we flip here, I'm no longer the player, I'm the listener, I'm listening to what you're soloing. It's satisfying to hear repetition, And it's also satisfying to hear variation. So it's satisfying to hear things repeated. You start to latch on to those things that have been repeated there as a phrase, a lick. Those things start to become familiar to you. So repetition is a good thing in soloing and improvising. You don't always have to play a different thing from line to line, phrase to phrase. But variation as well is important. If you always play the same thing again and again, it's going to be boring. So it's this idea of having the two, respecting both of them, repetition, variation. You don't, at this point, we're not even worrying about what notes we're playing. We're just thinking about this idea of play something, play it again, and then maybe play something that contrasts with it, or play something that is slightly different from it. These ideas, no matter your level, you can start putting into your playing. And if you listen to your favorite harmonica players, you'll notice it doesn't matter how good they are, they're never too good to use repetition. So you'll hear amazing players, whoever your favorite players are, you'll hear them using repetition. You'll hear them playing, they'll start a solo with, and then that was actually a slight variation rhythmically, but the same note. And it's satisfying to hear that again. Maybe when the chord changes, a variation, but not a completely different phrase. I'm still using the same lick pickup at the start. This is an A harp. I don't know why I'm showing you the end of it. It doesn't say it on it. This is an A harp. The backing track which I was playing before, was in E. So A harp in second position. So even before you start to think about what notes to play, you can, even prior to that, just thinking about the structure of the 12-bar blues, you can think about where your phrases are going to go and whether you're going to repeat a line or whether you're going to play something different as a contrast. Okay, that's at the most basic level. But a lot of the time, what students are worried about and what I get questions about is note selection. So that means, how are you choosing which notes to play over which chords? So it might be you're thinking about scales or playing arpeggios or how to build a lick. What are the best notes to build some licks? So I'm going to give you a few ideas now that hopefully will be useful for you. So it can be really useful to practice scales, and don't be scared if you're scared of music theory. I'm just going to tell you the notes. They're really useful to practice. So it can be useful to practice the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic, and the blues scale. All of those scales are useful scales for the blues. That's because of the chords we're playing over. The chords you're playing over mainly with blues, you're mainly playing over seventh chords, dominant seventh chords. That just means that you've got this tension between going major, going bright, going positive, and then going minor, going darker and more negative or more introspective. And blues has this beautiful contrast between those. So you can choose to go one way or another, and you can change that from line to line or solo to solo or song to song. But it can be really useful to practice those scales to get you started. So let's think about this is a really popular scale. So minor pentatonic, they're notes picked from the minor scale. Pentatonic, because there's 5 notes. I played 6 notes then, but I was playing the 5 notes and then the octave note. So the lowest note played up at the top, just for resolution. So second position on an A harp. We've got our 2 draw, 3 draw, half step bend, 4 blow, 4 draw, 5 draw, and then 6 blow. That's the 5 notes, and then 6 blow to finish us off there. So they are a really popular set of notes, the minor pentatonic, for building phrases. But that's for the 1 chord. Now, when it goes to the 4 chord or the 5 chord, a different set of notes will serve that purpose over that new chord. So over the 1 chord, that set will be really strong. When it goes to the 4 chord, not all of those notes will be as strong. Now, all the chords in a standard blues are pretty interrelated, so they wouldn't be awful if you played those notes, but it can be really impressive or musically logical almost to learn the corresponding notes on the next chord. Now, the problem with our 4 chord is that it's hard to play minor pentatonic on that chord because the harmonica naturally wants to give you the major scale. So you'd have to, I'm thinking off the top of my head, you'd have to overblow to get the flattened 3rd, and then you'd have to overblow to get the flat 7 if you're playing in the middle of the harp. So I've not set this harp up for overblows, you probably won't want to do it. I can get it, but so you've got 4 blow, 4 overblow, 5 draw, 6 blow, 6 overblow, 7 blow. Now, immediately we've got a problem. What if I can't overblow? And this is where you start to come up against the limits or the quirks. Let's try not to make it too negative. The quirks of the harmonica. What you'll find is that over certain chords or certain parts of the 12-bar blues or even certain parts of the harmonica, it's easier or more difficult to play a certain scale, and therefore playing certain licks and riffs. And you'll notice that when you're aware of this, you'll notice this in solos. You'll notice that over the 1 chord, it's easier to get the darker, bluesier side of things. And then over the 4 chord, it's harder. It's just harder to get those notes. So sometimes you'll hear almost an inconsistency in the solo. You'll hear this kind of... If we add in the 4-draw bend, then we get the full blues scale. So minor pentatonic plus that 4-draw bend is a blues scale. Even bluesier. And then it goes to the 4 chord, and you'll often hear, which is not really major, but it's got the major 3rd instead of the minor 3rd because I haven't played the overblow. That's just a quirk of the harmonica. You can get a harmonica that's tuned differently to suit the scale you're trying to play, or you could learn to overblow, or you could accept this quirk, or you could kind of play around it. The scales are all there if the technique is there, but that's a big if. That's a big, in capital letters, IF. You know, it's easy to say, but they are there. When you get to the 5 chord, it's kind of easier again to play that minor pentatonic. So I'm going to have to think off the top of my head again. I should have thought these through. I think that's it. So 1 draw, 2 draw full step bend, 2 draw, 3 draw full step bend, 4 blow, 4 draw. So what you can practice is just playing through the notes of a scale, just going up and down those notes, one note per beat, and kind of practicing where those notes are, and then start mixing those up, mix them up to come up with phrases. So instead of, I might start going, same notes. That sort of thing, where I'm just starting to mix up the same set of notes to become phrases, to become licks, things that I could use in a solo. So it's that knowledge of the notes I want to play that's informing the phrases I'm playing, instead of randomly just playing any old notes, you know, without any knowledge behind it. Now, at this point, I want to talk about this idea of logic and patterns beneath what you're playing, because improvisation is thought of as this thing that comes out of thin air. It comes from God, or it comes from just inspiration in the around you, or it comes from inside you, but just like that, from nowhere. And that's true in the sense that you might be creating something that you've never played before and you'll never play again. But I guarantee you, again, your favorite harmonica players, there'll be a logic or a pattern underneath what they're playing. That could be conscious or unconscious. So as a contrast, I'll tell you about the time I met Magic Dick and James Harmon, the late great James Harmon. Both lovely guys, both fantastic harmonica players. And I was sitting talking to Magic Dick for a YouTube interview, and James Harmon was in the room. And Magic Dick is very kind of theoretical and knowledgeable on a conscious level about what the notes he's choosing to play. And James Harmon is kind of the opposite, in that he was very instinctive, but he still played to these patterns, this logic, and you can still hear that in what he's playing. That doesn't mean he's thinking about it or that he's thought it through, but they've somehow got in to his playing, and that's part of what made him a great player. So he's still aware that a note sounds good over a certain chord. He might not be able to tell you that's the flat seventh of the 4 chord or whatever, you know, but it's still in there in his playing. So we don't have to be afraid of losing our inspiration, losing our ability to sound kind of improvisational, to sound spontaneous, to sound exciting and inspired by learning these things, because on some level all the great players know this, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Okay, let's see what questions we've got that have come in via email already, and I'll try and work them into what we're doing. If you've got a question and you're watching now, then put it in the chat and I'll try and answer that as well. Okay, so Arvind emailed me saying, say we're playing blues in second position, G on a C harp. Does the first note on bar 1 have to be the root note of that chord? And then you play any notes of the blues scale up to bar 4. And then at bar 5, do you have to play the first note being the root note of that chord, and so on? Short answer, no. Longer answer, no, because the whole idea here is that there's a range of notes you could play. In theory, you could play any note over any chord. There's no moral sort of aspect to this. There's also no right or wrong. There's loads of music theory, right? And there's loads of rules, so-called rules you can create. But at the end of the day, music is about creating sounds, creating a mix of sounds that the listener will enjoy. And there are certain things, certain harmonies, certain combinations of notes that most people's ears will find pleasing. But there's a range. So just like I was talking about with the blues scale or the minor pentatonic, you can start mixing those up. You don't need to play that root note as the first note. You don't even need to play that root note at all. The lick could be, so if I miss out that 2 draw and I don't play the 6 draw either, you could just play. I mean, that lick would work over the 1 chord, but there's no root note there. And that's okay. That's fine. So certainly, no, you don't need to start with the root notes. You don't even need to play them. It's useful too. Okay, so Glenn asked by email, when do you choose first position blues playing? So you're playing a solo, when would you choose to play first position? So it's usually a stylistic choice. It's just to create variety. Let's say most of your songs are in second position. If you're choosing to play you're playing loads of solos throughout the night, you might pick a song to be a first position song. But you'd also be tactical about it. Hey, Rick, thanks for joining in from New York City. You'd be tactical about this. So let's say it's a minor blues. I mentioned that the minor pentatonic and the minor scale, difficult to play when you're playing the 4 chord in second position. That's the same as the 1 chord in first position. So an A harp playing over an A minor blues. I'm unlikely to pick first position for a minor blues because it's hard. It's hard. I'm going to have to play loads of overblows and bends just to get the notes to sound good. So it's a tactical choice that I'm making to not play first position for that minor blues. I'm more likely to play third position, or second position might work as well. So there's kind of choices for variety and kind of tactical choices and theoretical choices behind it. I've been trying to put some first position stuff into my set recently because I think it's really cool and sounds really nice. But you'll notice when people are soloing in first position, you'll hear a lot of the bottom end. And then the top end. I hope those notes were coming through, not too squeaky. You won't hear a lot in the middle of the harp. That's because you've got the major scale in the middle there. And again, you'd have to overblow. It's really hard to get that to sound bluesy. So that's why you hear, if you listen, like Jimmy Reed is a good example, mainly up the top end. But anyone playing first position, often you'll get down the bottom end, up the top end, and nothing in between, or very little in that middle octave. So yeah, that was Glenn. I can see you in the chat as well, Glenn. Glad you could make it. What else have we got? So Jacob in Germany emailed me and says, I can count with the 12-bar blues structure and improvise some licks over the 1 chord, but every time the 4 and 5 chord comes up, I go blank. I've heard many players play over these chords as if they weren't there, and I'm a little confused. What should I do over these chords? I usually just end up playing the root note for the entire chord. Also, do you have any lessons or guides on general improvisation? Yeah, I've just done a YouTube series on improvisation. Check out my last 5 YouTube videos, but also check out the course, which is 40% off till the end of this Q&A. 4 and 5 chords, yes. So I mentioned the minor pentatonic scale. That's just one choice of sets of notes to pick from. Another would be the blues scale, which is just the minor pentatonic with the flat 5 added. Another would be the major pentatonic scale. I won't go into that now, but it just gives you a more major sound. But it does work. I mean, I'm kind of overdoing the majorness of it there, but it does work for blues. I teach all of these in the course. But the simplest way to start is with arpeggios. So that means the chords you're playing over, picking out the notes that make up those chords. So most of the time we're going to play over seventh chords. So if we can pick out the notes that the guitar or the bass or piano or whatever are playing over those chords, we can start to use those notes to build our solos. So if we know what those notes are for the 1, 4, and 5, then crucially, in answer to Jacob's question, we can start to come up with phrases over the 4 and the 5 chord. So quickly, on the 1 chord, we've got 2, 3, 4, and 5 draw. They're the notes that make up a 7th chord, the 1 chord, the 7th chord. So you can start just so that's our 1 chord. The 4 chord, we've got 1 blow, 2 blow, 3 blow or 2 draw. They're the same note. I'm going to say 2 draw, so 2 draw, and then 3 draw half step bend. Okay, so you can play that over the 4 chord, and then the 5 chord, we've got 1 draw, 2 draw half step bend, 3 draw full step bend, and 4 blow. If I play through those, just imagining I'm playing over a track, that sounds like a 12-bar blues. It sounds a bit like a bass line, because often the bass line would play that kind of like ascending line like that. But you can hear the structure, you can hear the chords. I'm not playing chords, I'm just playing the individual notes, but you can hear that fits a blues. That's because I'm playing the notes that the chords would be made of. So arpeggios, that's what I'm playing. Now, if you start again to mix those up, you can build lines that fit each of those chords. So on the 4 chord, if I start to play with those, that would fit the 4 chord. On the 5 chord, if I start mixing those, completely went out of time, but you get the idea. Those notes would fit over the 5 chord. It's simply a case of learning the notes for each chord, in this case the arpeggios for those chords, and then mixing them up. You don't even have to play many of them. You could just pick one of those notes. You know, on the 4 chord, you could just play the 3 draw half step bend, and that would fit for that chord. So you can keep it. And again, I want to come back to the idea that there isn't a right or wrong. There are just different ideas. There are different options for what you do over one chord or the next. So I've talked about the minor pentatonic, very quickly mentioned the blues scale. and the arpeggios of your seventh chords. Again, the major pentatonic, which I'm not going to go into, but that would work as well. It's just having different selections of notes that you can pick and choose from as and when you feel that they are right for you, or to contrast. You've used one in one song, use another in another. Okay, but this all depends on knowing the structure you're playing over. So if it's a standard 12-bar blues, great. If it's a different structure, an 8-bar, 16-bar blues, you've got to think about that. I have got planned a blues structure course about all the different common structures. Hopefully, I'll do a Q&A on that in the future as well. Okay, I've got couple more questions that have come in by email, and I think I've had a few questions in the chat as well. Pablo says in the chat, we share an admiration for Paul Delay. Yeah, Paul, what a soloist Paul Delay was. It'd be great to make a video analyzing his style. Yeah, his phrasing just incredible. Congratulations on your channel. Greetings from Uruguay. Cheers, Pablo. Thank you. Okay. Benjamin Martin asked me on Facebook, what are some ideas for turnarounds and 4-chord improv phrases? Yeah, so I mean, I talked a bit about 4 chords, but let's think about the turnaround. So the most common way to play a turnaround is that at the end of the 12-bar blues, there's an extra little 5-chord added in. Okay, now sometimes that will take the whole of bar 12. Sometimes it'll just take 2 beats or 2.5 beats. So you kind of hear this. I'm not on the harmonica, but I mean, like, that's the chord you'll hear. You'll hear 1 chord, and then to the 5 chord. And that's called a turnaround. It's like a pickup into the next 12 bars. Tells you you've reached the end, and it tells you we're going to start again. And it's just an extra little chord out of interest. Now, on the harmonica, the most common thing you will have heard that fits that turnaround is kind of a... So that's like 2 draw, and then to the 2 blow and the 1 draw. Or you could do a 2 draw bend instead of a 2 blow. That kind of thing is a really common way to play a turnaround, but really, the sky's the limit when you're thinking about picking from sets of notes that fit the chord. So remember I talked about just a minute ago, the 5 chord, 1 draw, 2 draw half step bend, 3 draw full step bend, 4 blow. So you could go to any of those notes or any combination of those notes for that last little chord at the end. So one kind of cool way of doing it is to go to the 4 blow, because most people think 4 blow for the 4 chord, because that's that, you know, it tends to think draw notes on the 1 chord, blow notes on the 4 chord. So 4 blow, the root note of the 4 chord, but it works on the 5 chord. So at the end for the turnaround, instead of going, you could go, and it works. Try it to a backing track. Try it to, you know, a jam playing. That 4 blow actually works, and it's kind of, because a lot of beginners and intermediate players wouldn't necessarily think of doing that. It's something a little bit different. But really, you could pick from any. Well, in theory, you could pick any note, but the safest thing to do is to pick from one of those sets of notes I've talked about: minor pentatonic, blues scale, major pentatonic, or just the arpeggios, simply the arpeggios. What else have I think I've got one more email, and then I'm going to answer anything that's in the chat. I can see there's some that have come in. Let's see, what have I missed? Okay, so Sorin emailed me and said that one problem I have when I'm soloing is I forget the sequence I wanted to make, and I suddenly have to improvise, and I get nervous and lose my lines. I get empty of ideas and panic. The other issue I have is to respect the allocated slot for the solo, the timing of that. Okay, so quickly on those 2 points then. Yeah, this thing of losing where you are, when you're practicing at home, it's a different situation from when you're playing with other musicians, okay? Or, out at a jam night, whatever. And we need to separate these two. When you're practicing at home, it should be conscious. You should be mindful. You should be trying to be present in that practice, thinking about the note selection. So I'll be thinking on that 4 chord and practicing playing the arpeggios, or practicing building licks out of the arpeggio notes, the chord notes. I'm practicing building phrases out of the notes that make up the arpeggio. When I'm playing with a band, live, whatever, it has to be unconscious. The mindset you have to be in, the space you have to be in, is about performing. So if you're still having to think about those things, you haven't done enough practice learning those notes, because your improvisation should be just flowing. I'm not saying it's always going to be perfect or amazing, but it should be coming unconsciously, because you've done all that conscious practice at home. And then the other thing about respecting the allocated slot, yeah, I mean, again, the more practice you do playing to a backing track, the better you'll get at listening whilst playing. Eye contact is always great, because someone's going to tell you if they're done, or you'll see them going to play their sax solo after you or whatever. But also listening out for things like listening out for the 5 chord, because the 5 chord is a really good indicator of where you're going. You only hear it 1 bar in the 12 bar. Or listen out for the turnaround. If there's a turnaround, oh, that's it, right, we've got to the end of the 12 bars. It's difficult though. Okay, I think we've had a few questions in the chat. Samuel says, how can you improvise in other positions, 4th, 5th, or 12th? Ooh, okay, so I mean, I don't do much. Well, I've never really played in 4th or 5th. I do a little bit in 12th, not necessarily for blues stuff. See, the thing is, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd give you a good range of textural variety and options for more major songs, more minor songs, and then everything in between. Because 1st position naturally wants to be major, 3rd position works really well for minor, and 2nd position has that contrast between the two, which is why it's so great for blues. The other positions, you then have to know where your notes are. So just going to take something off the wall and show you. This is a diagram of all the notes on every key of harmonica. When you start to play in different positions, 4th, 5th, 12th, really helps to know where your notes are available are. So these are the draw bends, blow bends, overblows, overdraws. Where do those notes sit? Because you're going to have to start to be a bit more creative. If you're trying to play those arpeggios in 12th position, they're going to sit in a different place, in maybe a weird place. So 12th position, everything's a tone down from 2nd. I'm thinking on my head here. So 2 draw full step bend, 3 draw full step bend, 4 blow, and then 4 overblow would give you the arpeggio for 12th position. So you can get those notes, but they're more difficult. But then you need to know where the 4 chord and the 5 chord would fit. So the 4 chord would start on your 3 draw half step bend, and then the 5 chord would be on the 4 blow, which is like the 4 chord in 2nd position. So you start at, I'm not going to go deeper into that, because I can almost feel through the computer screen confusion coming at me. When it gets to that point, you have to be really knowledgeable about the note selection, about the note layout of the instrument, and about the relationship between the chord that you're on and the notes you're playing on the instrument, but also the relationship between the home chord, if you like, the home key, the home center of the chord, the key, sorry, and then the other chords that you're playing over throughout the length of that song. Again, different positions can work if you're a good enough player. I'm just not good enough to play in those positions really much. Fourth and fifth do work quite well for minor keys, but I find third position just works really nicely, so that tends to be my go-to. Uncle says, I got a harmonica 5 years ago, just played and played, never looked at tabs until yesterday. Thanks to you, I learned House of the Rising Sun. Yeah, tabs can be useful. I mean, when we're talking about improvising, it can be great to start with tabs, whether they are scales or arpeggios, as I've been talking about, or someone else's tab to a song, and then start to move away from it. Importantly, I want you to believe in yourself. I want you to trust that you can build solos. No matter your level, if you're a complete beginner, you can build a solo. And because improvisation is often thought of as kind of the highest form of music, and the best players out there are amazing improvisers, sometimes it can be intimidating. But I want to say to you now, I believe in you and your playing. No matter your level, you can start to improvise. And that's why I mentioned this idea of just giving it a go at the start. And then a little bit of knowledge will take you a long way. A few simple notes. You can play an amazing solo. Think of B.B. King, great player, but some of his solos, there is just a few notes, but the way he plays positions, you don't have to play in weird positions. Okay, let's see what else we have in the chat that I might have missed. Oh, hey Hank, how you doing? How do you feel about alternate tunings? That, I'm glad you asked that, Hank, right? Because I have always been scared of alternate tunings. I've always been scared of them because I've become a bit of a dinosaur. I'm so used to Richter, and it's so kind of limited in so many ways, but it is what it is, and I'm just sort of used to it. That said, I recently went to see, I popped in, I was passing through Canterbury, and beautiful city, by the way, worth visiting. And I went to see Brendan Power, who's based down that way. And he was showing me his power bender, showed me loads of his harps. I've got a video coming out soon about me visiting his workshop. And I've been loving the power bender. So the idea of this is that you've got bends the whole way up on the draw notes. So you don't have to get that weird switch from hole 6 to 7. And it just means you've got that creativity up and down the instrument, that textural variety. So that's second position. Strangely, this is an A flat, which is a bit of a random key. But second position, normally, when you'd get to that hole 6, suddenly you'd have to either start overblowing or just accept that you're going to have to play. If I get a normal A flat Richter, it's suddenly going to be major pentatonic. And I can't get the bends on all those notes, but the power bender means I can. So I've just been giving it a little go the last couple of days, so I can't really play the thing. But it's made me think, like, maybe I could get into a different tuning. I'm thinking of trying out some half-valved harps as well. So normal Richter layout, but half-valved. In terms of listening to other people who play them, I love all these different tunings. Will Wilde sounds amazing with his tuning. Brendan Power sounds awesome with all his different tunings. I just love variety and creativity. So, like, if you sound good on it, great. I've just always been a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to layouts. Hey Rod, nice to see you. Rod Boys is in the house. Great advice on the chord arpeggios. Yeah, they're so important. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to come up with or it can be hard to come up with your own ideas without a basis, a starting point, you know. And that's why I come back to this idea of your favorite players, even if they're not conscious of these things, they'll be underlying everything that they play. So that they are going to be somehow tacitly aware of the notes that fit over one or another chord. They're going to be aware that like 4 draw fits on the one chord, sounds good. They're just going to be aware that those notes fit, and then when it goes to the 4 chord, they're going to be aware, you know. So it's in there somewhere, and why not learn it consciously? The knowledge is there. Let's learn it consciously, and then it becomes unconsciously. Clay says, I bought the bought the ED harp, couldn't get it. Yeah. Personally, the way that I've learned to play, the way that I've learned to improvise, a lot of it has just been playing along, listening, playing along with things, and learning as I went. And then the conscious side of it, I've probably learned more about consciously understanding the theory by teaching, because it's a good way to communicate with people, especially if people are coming from a more theoretical background on another instrument, for example. So the other thing which I haven't mentioned so far is that playing, the more time you have this instrument in your mouth, you know, the better you're going to get. The more you're playing with backing tracks, the more you're playing with other instruments. I can't get my words out today. The more you're playing with other musicians, the better. You know, you're going to start to hear, you're going to use your ears. I talk a lot with my students, with my school, with my courses about using your ears. Your ears are such an amazing tool. They are your biggest asset as a musician. Listen. And again, trust yourself. I trust you. A lot of people say I could never play an instrument, or people say it with singing, I could never sing, I could never learn to sing. I believe we all can. I'm not saying we're all going to be Mariah Carey or whoever, you know, but we can all learn to hone these things, and it starts with your ears. There's loads of other stuff that I wanted to get through, but I knew that there was going to be too much, because I haven't really mentioned rhythmic variety, dynamics, textures. These are all considerations. A lot of what we talk about with soloing, we end up talking about note selection, which is mainly what I've talked about today. How do I choose which notes fit over which chords? But there's loads more to it, because that's just giving you the skeleton, if you like, of the solo. How do you flesh it out into a full thing? So briefly, rhythmic variety, note lengths, choosing a variety of note lengths. You know, if all your solos, let's say you're really good with your triplets or something, if all your solos are that's awful. I mean, the notes all fit, but it's like there's nothing interesting there. You've got to put a variety of notes in. So start with a long note, and then some triplets, and then some eighth notes or quarter notes or whatever. And that's when you get a juicy phrase. That's when something is, you know, that's a range of notes. So you've got, I think I played like a half note, so 2 beats, and then some triplets in there somewhere, some quarter notes, a variety of notes. So you can practice, you know, playing all these different lengths. You can practice like 4 notes, so essentially a full beat. So 4 beats, so a full note. So whatever, you know, and then practice half notes. Now, these aren't solos. I'm just practicing playing different lengths. Quarter notes. Again, picking from, that was kind of minor pentatonic, but picking from a set of notes, practicing different lengths so that you're comfortable with them, and then start mixing them up, a combination of all those different notes. Again, I talk about this in the full course. Dynamics, bringing things down and up, so you can go louder and more intense, you can go quieter and softer. I did a video on this very recently on YouTube. Check out on the YouTube channel, one of the blues improv lessons is about dynamics. And then textures, single notes, double stops, tongue textures, using bends as textures, bending in and out of notes. There are so many considerations for adding to your solos, for making your solos as good as they can possibly be. These are all part of your choices, the options that you're choosing from when you're creating a solo. It's not just about the note selection. So think about these things as you're coming to building solos. These are things I practice. I sit and practice these different aspects. I'll say, like, you know, do a few minutes practicing different textures, a few minutes practicing bringing the dynamics up and down, a few minutes practicing the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic, the blues scale, the arpeggios, you know, all of these things, rhythmic varieties. There are so many things, and that's the beauty of improvisation, the beauty of the blues and the beauty of the harmonica. There's so much to learn, and don't see it as in a defeatist, what's the point way. See it as you're like a kid in a sweet shop or in a toy shop. You know, there are endless varieties, endless possibilities for you to create the best solos you can. We are up to an hour. I am going to take down the sale on the course in. I'll probably leave it up for the next half an hour. So at 3:30 UK time, I'll take it down just so you get a chance to go and look at it. So it's just LearnTheHarmonica.com/blues-other. So that's the thing. On there is a full blues improvisation course, 5 different modules. It's 40% off at the minute because I want to say thank you for joining into this. As I say, I'll leave it up for half an hour. It'll still be up, and then half an hour it'll still be up, and then it is going to be gone back up to the full price. But thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of this. There's so much that you can get into when you're talking about blues improvisation. I hope, as I said at the start, there's no right or wrong. There are just approaches. I hope that something has resonated for you, and that you're able to go away and give it a go. Do check out the 5 latest free lessons I've put on my YouTube channel, because they are all related to this blues improv idea. I'm going to be next week moving on to something new. I don't know what yet, but the channel is going to be moving on to a new topic. So I hope you found the series useful, and I hope you found this useful today. Thanks for joining me from all over the world. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys again soon sometime. Until then, take care and enjoy your playing.